moment in the history, the visible history of intelligence work in this country, where the intelligence service itself became effectively co-author and signatory to the so-called dodgy dossier, which, on the strength of which Colin Powell was able to present a dire picture of the threat from Iraq, which turned out to be untrue.
January of 2003, one of the largest anti-war marches in world history happened just behind us here.
I took part in it, yeah.
And what are your reflections now?
Well, I think that my anger still stands. I can't understand that Blair has an afterlife at all. It seems to me that any politician who takes his country to war under false pretenses has committed the ultimate sin. I think that a war in which we refuse to accept the body count of those we kill is also a war of which we should be ashamed. We've always got to be careful of that. I think that I wasn't speaking as a prophet. I was just speaking as an angry citizen, I suppose. I think it's true that we've caused irreparable damage in the Middle East. I think we shall pay for it for a long time. One of the problems, surely, is that victims never forget, and the winners do, and they forget very quickly. If people knew, basically, for example, what we had done in Iran when we ousted Mossadegh through the CIA and Secret Service here across the way, and installed the Shah, and trained his ghastly secret police force in all the black arts, the Savak. If people understood the extent to which we had humiliated Iran, then they would understand the later developments in Iran and Iran's posture now. If people would look at the map and see the extent to which Iran is encircled by nuclear powers, they wouldn't take it perhaps quite so seriously that Iran is seeking to arm itself with, if it is, with nuclear weapons. I remain terrified of the capacity of the media, the capacity of spin doctors here and abroad, particularly the United States media, to perpetuate false lies, perpetuate lies. Mussolini, I think, defined fascism as the moment when you couldn't put a cigarette paper between political and corporate power. He assumed, when he offered that definition, that media power was already his. But I worry terribly that the absence of serious critical argument is going to produce a new kind of fanaticism, the new simplicities that are as dangerous as the ones which caused us to march against Iraq and as misunderstood.
Can you talk, David Cornwell, a.k.a. John le Carré, about what's happening with Tony Blair, with his new book out, with event after event being canceled, eggs being thrown at him, the anger on the streets? Well,
I don't know what the level of protest was in the United States by the time you went to war in Iraq. But here, I think an aggregate of about 3 million people marched in Britain. The first march in which I took part must have numbered something like 1 million. And and I remember we stopped this huge crowd, which was being really very crudely manhandled by the police at the edges. We stopped. We were all wedged together looking into Downing Street, where the Prime Minister's residence is. And nobody seemed to speak, but a kind of feral roar of popular will rose. And I tried to imagine what it must have been like for Blair sitting inside that building and hearing that sound. It was like a huge cry that goes up at a football game or something like that, where you actually, it is no longer verbalized. It's just this animal seething noise. And I think it will always be remembered of him that he took us to war as most people perceive, on the strength of lies. Now, you have to bear in mind also that we are creating what American media are referring to as a deep state in this country. That is, I think I read indeed in the Washington Post that 890-odd thousand Americans who are not in government service are cleared for top secret and above. I don't know to what extent that situation is replicated here, but more and more I have the feeling that the power of the counter-terror market is expanding and creating a wider and ever-widening circle of those who are initiated, indoctrinated, part of the security structure, whether directly or indirectly, and those who are not. So then it makes it possible, as at the time, for example, of the parliamentary vote on whether we should go to war in Iraq, it makes it possible for a senior MP to take a neophyte aside and say, if you'd seen the papers that I've seen, you would know which lobby to go into when the vote comes up. And this suggestion that there are those in the know and those not in the know, and that those not in the know are second-class citizens, is extremely dangerous to society. And I think we have to address it all the time. We have no idea. We don't have a spokesman for these intelligence services, either one of them, either one of the three main intelligence services. We have inspired leaks. We have people who seem to speak with authority. But when somebody tells us suddenly that we've gone on to red alert and there are tanks outside London Airport or whatever it is, we don't know by what process this definition reaches us. It's very easy inside an intelligence service to develop a capsule mentality. You live inside the bubble. The one thing you begin to lose is common sense, the sense of balance. And particularly when it's men, altogether men in a room. I always think that was the awful secret of the Bay of Pigs catastrophe. It was actually the guys telling each other who they were, and they were frightfully clever men, and they'd done amazing things, some of them horrible things, in Vietnam. And they were together and they were conspiring. There was nobody there to say, boys, just take it down a bit. Just step back. Is this sensible? Do we really believe the Cubans are going to rush down and embrace our troops when they land on the beach?
It's 7 years after the invasion of Iraq. You've moved from Blair in this country, and in the United States it's gone from Bush to Obama, who then expanded the war in Afghanistan. What is your assessment of the United States?
I suffer from the same frustration that every decent American suffers from. That is that you begin to wonder whether decent liberal instincts, decent humanitarian instincts can actually penetrate the right-wing voice, get through the steering of American opinion by the mass media. I don't know what the percentage now is, but I believe it's still something like 65 or 70% of Americans believe that Saddam was involved in the Twin Towers. Am I right in that? Something like that. Well, we haven't gone as far down that road yet, but we do have pretty horrendous manipulation of the media by our various press barons, and we have enormous intrusions into our domestic affairs by the Rupert Murdoch empire. I find that very scary. You know, former Australian, now an American, dictating to Brits what they should be thinking. I find that very, very, very unsettling, and I oppose it wherever I can. Therefore, as I say, I share the frustration, I think, of very many Americans, that when something is clear common sense, when there's a great humanitarian need, somehow or another it's the conservative voice, the orthodox voice, the chauvinistic or the patriotic voice that outshouts other people's decent thinking processes. I think it's crudely put, but it's a very crude situation. It's the feeling I think that many of us have of Obama is that the good things he would really like to do are being frustrated, and now his own Democratic Party is not helping or supporting him, and that the corporate and other lobbies are tying his hands. I think that's the most charitable perception that one can make.
David, would you go to one of Tony Blair's events?
No, I wouldn't, nor would I buy the book. At the last election in which he stood, I was invited by the Guardian newspaper to interview him, and after much thought I declined because I did not see how I could lay a glove on him. And I've asked some pretty heavy-hitting journalists what questions they would have asked in retrospect that might have unseated him a little, that might have thrown him